In the land where the sun painted the earth with shades of gold and crimson, and the endless horizon stretched as far as the eye could see, there lived a lion, known throughout the savannah as Kiongosi, the king. His roar reverberated across the plains, striking both awe and fear into the hearts of all who heard it. No creature dared challenge his reign. He was both wise and just, ruling with fairness that was the stuff of legends. But like all kings, he was not immune to the treachery that sometimes lurks even in the most trusted of allies. The lion's closest confidant was Te, a jackal of sharp wit and quicker reflexes. Te had been by Kiongosi's side for many seasons, always offering counsel, advice, and guidance. He was sly and clever, traits that endeared him to the lion, who appreciated Te's ability to navigate the politics of the wild. Kiongosi, ever the proud king, valued strength, but he also understood the importance of a clever mind. One hot, dry afternoon, as the sun blazed high in the sky, Kiongosi and Te sat beneath the shade of an ancient baobab tree. The ground beneath them was cracked and dry from months without rain. The scent of dust filled the air, and the trees around them seemed to stand silent and still, as though holding their breath. "Te," Kiongosi rumbled, his deep voice carrying the weight of the years. "Our lands are shrinking. The herds move farther, and the waters grow scarce. There are whispers among the other creatures that a time of famine is near. We must be prepared." Te's amber eyes gleamed with a flicker of ambition as he leaned closer to the lion. "Yes, my king," he said in a voice that was smooth as silk. "But there is another way, perhaps a better way. The gazelles, the wildebeests, they move in great numbers to the west. What if, instead of chasing them across the savannah, we strike quickly and decisively? We could trap them, divide their herds, and take all that they have." Kiongosi's golden eyes narrowed as he considered Te's words. It was a bold plan, one that would indeed guarantee the lion's pride a great feast. But something within Kiongosi stirred, an uneasy feeling he couldn't quite place. "You suggest treachery, Te," Kiongosi said, his voice heavy with suspicion. "We are rulers by strength, not by deceit. The balance of the wild must be maintained. If we break that balance, we invite chaos." Te, sensing the hesitation in his king's voice, smiled broadly, his sharp teeth gleaming in the sunlight. "My king, trust me. The herds are weak, and our pride is strong. By the time they realize what has happened, it will be too late. We will secure our future and ensure that no other lion dares to challenge your reign." Kiongosi paused, feeling the weight of the decision upon him. Te was right in some respects. The rains had been scarce, and the herds had moved far beyond their reach. The survival of the pride was at stake. But still, there was something in Te's words that made the lion's fur bristle. "I will think on it," Kiongosi said at last, rising to his feet. "For now we wait." The following days were marked by an uneasy tension. Kiongosi could not shake the feeling that Te was hiding something, that his ambitious plan was laced with a darker purpose. Yet, the weight of survival pressed heavily on his shoulders, and he trusted his friend, his confidant. But trust is a fragile thing, and Te's heart had already been set on something far darker than the lion could imagine. That night, as the stars shone coldly above the savannah, Kiongosi lay in his den, his massive body stretched across the cool earth. His thoughts wandered to his pride, his family, and the future. He had always ruled with honor, but could he continue to do so when faced with such dire circumstances? Was it time for him to step away from his code of justice, to consider a path that would secure the future of his kin? Suddenly, a rustling noise outside his den caught his attention. The lion rose silently, his ears twitching. He knew the sounds of the savannah, and this was not the usual night noise of creatures scurrying in the grass. Someone was near. A shadow moved past the entrance of his den, and Kiongosi's heart sank. He recognized the shape. It was Te. The jackal moved with purpose, his movements silent and fluid. Kiongosi's eyes glowed in the moonlight as he followed his old friend from the shadows. The jackal seemed to be heading toward the northern edge of the pride's territory. Kiongosi's instincts screamed at him to confront Te, to demand answers. But something in the jackal's movements told him that this night was not like any other. As the lion stalked closer, he sought to meet with a group of hyenas, their dark forms outlined against the pale moonlight. The jackal was speaking with them, his voice low and urgent. Kiongosi's heart pounded in his chest, and a chill ran down his spine. He had been betrayed. The realization struck him with the force of a thunderclap. The jackal who had served him faithfully was conspiring against him. The lion watched in silence as Te and the hyenas exchanged sharp words, their eyes glinting with malice. A storm of rage and betrayal roared within Kiongosi. But his pride, his family depended on him now. He could not let this treason go unpunished. He had to act. He had to strike swiftly before the jackal's plans could come to fruition. But even as he turned to leave, the wind whispered to him, as though the very land itself was warning him. Revenge would come, but it would not be without cost. The next morning, as the first rays of dawn stretched across the sky, casting a soft golden light over the savannah, Kiongosi could not shake the heaviness that had settled in his chest. The weight of betrayal hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating his every thought. The jackal, Te, had been a trusted ally, but now Kiongosi realized that loyalty is a fragile thread, easily severed by greed and ambition. The lion walked alone across the plains, his powerful paws stirring up the dry dust beneath him. His mind was a storm of thoughts, plans of retribution, of reclaiming his honor, and of the survival of his pride. Yet, beneath it all, there was an unsettling sense that revenge was not just about punishing the jackal, but also about confronting something deeper within himself. Kiongosi knew that to defeat Te and the hyenas, he needed to be clever, not just strong. He could no longer rely solely on his might as the king of the savannah. He had to think to outwit them and outlast them. But the question remained: how far was he willing to go for vengeance? The sun climbed higher, and with it, Kiongosi's resolve grew stronger. He returned to his pride, where his lionesses and cubs lay in the shade, waiting for his guidance. But there was no peace in his heart. The very land that had once sung songs of his reign now seemed quiet, almost ominous. The animals sensed it too. The air felt charged with tension, as though the savannah was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to break. Kiongosi stood before his pride, his voice commanding the attention of all who were near. "We are not the only creatures who roam these plains," he said, his tone grave. "A new threat has arisen among us. My trusted friend has betrayed us. He has allied himself with the hyenas, seeking to steal what is rightfully ours." The lionesses exchanged uneasy glances, their sharp eyes darting to each other. They had always trusted Kiongosi, but this news was unsettling. Betrayal, especially from one of their own, was not something they were accustomed to. They were warriors, but even they had their limits. One of the lionesses, Zuri, spoke up. Her voice was steady but tinged with concern. "What will you do, my king? The hyenas are many, and 'tis cunning. He will not be easy to defeat." Kiongosi's gaze hardened as he looked toward the horizon. "I will strike when they least expect it. But we must be patient. We cannot rush into battle like reckless fools. We must wait for the right moment." The pride nodded in agreement, understanding that the king's words were not just about strategy but about survival. But there was something else in Kiongosi's eyes, a deep, burning anger that was quickly turning into a thirst for vengeance. It was no longer just about reclaiming what had been stolen. It was about punishing those who dared to betray him. As the day wore on, Kiongosi retreated into his den, his mind consumed by the thoughts of Te's betrayal. The jackal, always so loyal, had turned on him for one reason: power. Te had always envied Kiongosi's strength and authority. Now, with the hyenas at his side, Te thought he could usurp the lion and claim the throne of the savannah for himself. Kiongosi clenched his jaw, the muscles in his neck tightening. He could not let this stand. He had to act, and soon. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dry earth, Kiongosi set out alone. His plan was simple. He would track Tee and the hyenas to their den and strike under the cover of darkness. With his knowledge of the land and his unmatched strength, he knew he could ambush them when they were least prepared. The savannah was eerily quiet as the lion moved through the grass, his large body low to the ground, blending into the landscape. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of the hyenas, a pungent musky odor that made Kiongosi's hackles rise. He was close. As he neared the edge of the savannah, Kiongosi paused to listen. The night was still, save for the distant calls of owls and the rustling of small creatures in the underbrush. The hyenas' laughter, often their signature sound, was absent. This unnerved the lion. Hyenas rarely traveled without making their presence known, and their silence felt unnatural. Kiongosi's instincts told him that something was wrong. The ambush he had been planning was now in jeopardy. He needed more information. The lion crouched in the tall grass, his golden eyes scanning the landscape for any sign of movement. In the distance, he saw the faint silhouettes of the hyenas. There were fewer than he had expected. Only 3 of them, and they were not near their den, but instead they seemed to be waiting in a clearing. Tee was among them. Kiongosi's heart thundered in his chest. The sight of the jackal made his blood boil, but he forced himself to stay calm. He could not afford to act impulsively. The right moment would come, but first, he needed to understand what was happening. From his vantage point, Kiongosi watched as Tee spoke to the hyenas, his voice low and urgent. There was a tension in the air, something Kiongosi had not anticipated. The hyenas appeared restless, uneasy. Something was happening that the lion could not yet understand. Then, a new figure emerged from the shadows, a sleek, shadowy figure that Kiongosi did not recognize. It was a leopard moving with quiet grace. The lion's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary leopard. This was Nzuri, a cunning and ruthless creature known for her ability to manipulate others to get what she wanted. She had long been a rival of Kiongosi, and her presence now signaled that the betrayal was far more intricate than he had originally thought. Nzuri spoke to Tee in a voice barely above a whisper, her words lost to the wind. But Kiongosi could see the exchange. A silent agreement, a deal struck between them. Tee had not just betrayed him for power. He had joined forces with Nzuri to destabilize the entire region, to overthrow the lion and claim dominion over the entire savannah. The implications of this new alliance were staggering. Nzuri had long been a thorn in Kiongosi's side, but with her alliance to Tee, the entire savannah could be plunged into chaos. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about the survival of his pride and the preservation of order in the wild. Kiongosi's eyes narrowed with resolve. He would not let his kingdom fall into the hands of traitors and opportunists. The hunt had begun, and the time for mercy had passed. As the sun sank below the horizon, Kiongosi made his decision. He would confront Tee and the hyenas, but not yet. He would wait for the perfect moment, a moment when they would least expect it. For now, he retreated into the shadows, a ghost among the grass, waiting for his chance to strike. The night had fallen like a blanket over the savannah, thick and impenetrable. Kiongosi moved with calculated precision, his every step in tune with the rhythm of the land. The air was cooler now, the scent of earth and foliage mixing with the lingering musk of hyenas. His mind raced as the pieces of the treacherous puzzle began to fit together, and the lion's resolve only hardened. He could not afford to hesitate any longer. The lion had always been the king of these lands, a creature revered for his strength and wisdom. But tonight, as he walked alone under the canopy of stars, the weight of leadership pressed heavily on his shoulders. This was no longer just a matter of reclaiming his throne. It was about preserving the balance of the savannah, for if the hyenas and their new allies succeeded, the very fabric of the land would unravel. But it wasn't just Tee, the jackal, who had betrayed him. Nzuri, the leopard, was the true mastermind behind the chaos. Her calculating nature had manipulated the situation, using Tae as a pawn in a larger game. Kyungosi's mind lingered on the thought of her. How her eyes gleamed with cold ambition. Her every move a reflection of the thirst for power that had consumed her for years. She had always been a master of the shadows, pulling strings from behind the scenes. Now, with the alliance of the hyenas, it seemed as though the savannah was on the verge of war. The lion paused at the edge of a dense thicket, his keen eyes scanning the surroundings. He had learned from his earlier observation that Taa and the hyenas were no longer where they had been. They had moved deeper into the heart of the savannah, to a secret meeting place known only to a few. Kyungosi's instincts told him that this was where the final confrontation would take place. The time for stealth and waiting was over. The time for action had come. Without a second thought, Kyungosi began to follow the trail, his massive paws leaving no trace on the ground. The night seemed to grow darker with each step, as if the very land itself was holding its breath, awaiting the inevitable clash. The lion's heart beat loudly in his chest, but his mind was calm, focused. Every muscle in his body was tuned to perfection. He was the hunter and now he was hunting. Hours passed before Kyungosi arrived at the clearing. The moon hung high above, casting a silvery glow on the scene before him. There, in the heart of the savannah, stood Te, flanked by the 3 hyenas, their bony forms moving restlessly under the pale light. But it was Nzuri who stood at the center, her sleek body poised and elegant as she surveyed the land around her. Her sharp eyes met Kyungosi's from across the clearing, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. It was as if the savannah itself paused, watching the 2 adversaries. Nzuri's lips curled into a slow, sinister smile. "Ah, the mighty Kyungosi. Finally, you've arrived." The lion did not flinch. He stood tall, his golden mane flowing like fire in the moonlight. "You are no longer welcome here, Nzuri. You and your allies have brought chaos to the savannah, and for that, there will be a reckoning." Nzuri chuckled, a soft, mocking sound that echoed through the silence. "A reckoning? You think you can stop me? You think you can defeat me, Kyungosi?" She stepped forward, her lithe form moving like a shadow. "I've played my game well. You were always too predictable, too trusting. Now the land belongs to me." Kyungosi's eyes burned with fury, but he kept his voice steady. "You underestimated me, Nzuri. And you underestimated the power of the pride." For a moment there was silence. Then, with a sudden movement, Te lunged at Kyungosi, his teeth bared in a vicious snarl. But the lion was faster. In a single fluid motion, Kyungosi sidestepped, his powerful paw striking Te across the face. The jackal yelped, staggering back. He had been a fool to think that he could ever match the king in strength. The hyenas growled, moving in to join the fray, but Nzuri raised a paw, signaling them to wait. "Let him have his moment," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "But it will be the last moment of his life." Kyungosi knew this was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when he would face his enemies head-on. The time for stealth and tactics had passed. Now it was time to fight for his pride, his land, and his very survival. He turned to face the jackal, his eyes narrowing with cold resolve. He was panting, his face a mask of fury and frustration. He had not expected to be so easily overpowered. But Kyungosi was a force unlike any other. He was the king of the savannah, and no betrayal, no matter how carefully planned, could ever break him. "You chose the wrong side, Te," Kyungosi growled, his voice low and threatening. "And now you will pay the price." Te snarled, gathering what little strength he had left. "You may be strong, Kyungosi, but you cannot defeat us all." But the lion was already moving. With a roar that shook the very earth beneath them, Kyungosi charged. The ground trembled as his massive frame barreled toward Te, who barely had time to react. The jackal tried to dodge, but Kyungosi's claws raked across his side, leaving deep, bloody gashes. The hyenas circled, but Nzuri was still standing at the edge of the clearing, watching with a detached amusement. She had never been one for direct confrontation. Her strength lay in manipulation, in turning others against each other. But she knew that Kiongosi's victory over Tee was inevitable. The question now was whether he could defeat the hyenas and survive the night. Kiongosi fought with the fury of a lion betrayed. His every move a testament to his strength and leadership. The hyenas lunged at him from all sides, but he was a blur of motion, his claws striking with deadly precision. Each strike was a declaration of war, a message that he would not bow to traitors or thieves. Despite their numbers, the hyenas were no match for the lion's might. One by one they fell to the ground, defeated and broken. Kiongosi was a whirlwind of fury, unstoppable, relentless. But as the last hyena collapsed, he turned his gaze to Nzuri. The leopard's eyes gleamed with defiance, but Kiongosi could see the fear lurking beneath the surface. She was not as invincible as she appeared. "You've lost, Nzuri," Kiongosi said, his voice low but steady. "Your game is over." Nzuri's smile faltered, and for a moment, she looked almost human in her vulnerability. But then, in an instant, she vanished into the shadows, a blur of motion as she disappeared into the thick underbrush. Kiongosi roared in frustration, but he knew that catching her now was impossible. Nzuri was gone, at least for tonight. As the dust settled and the savannah returned to its eerie stillness, Kiongosi stood alone amidst the wreckage of his enemies. His pride, though not physically present, was with him in spirit. He had won, but the battle was far from over. Nzuri and Tee were not easily defeated, and Kiongosi knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger war. The first rays of dawn broke through the canopy of the savannah, casting long shadows across the land. The soft golden light illuminated the aftermath of the battle, the fallen hyenas, the disoriented Tee, and the lone lion standing amidst the wreckage. Kiongosi's muscles still burned from the fight, but his heart was heavy with the knowledge that this was only a temporary victory. Nzuri had escaped, and with her, the darkest secrets of the savannah remained hidden. The lion's mind wandered back to his younger days, to the time before the betrayal. He remembered when Nzuri was not an enemy, but an ally. She had been like a sister to him, someone who had once shared his dreams of ruling the savannah with wisdom and compassion. But somewhere along the way, her hunger for power had consumed her, turning her into the very thing they had once sworn to fight against. Kiongosi's paws were stained with the blood of the hyenas and Tee, but the weight on his shoulders was far greater than any wound. He had been forced to shed his old self, to become something more than a mere ruler. The savannah no longer seemed like the home he had once known. The lines between friend and foe had blurred, and trust was a currency more precious than gold. He looked up to the horizon, where the sun was now rising in full force. His pride was scattered, some members missing, others left to fend for themselves in the wake of the chaos. Kiongosi knew that the savannah would not heal easily. The scars of betrayal ran deep, and the wounds would take time to mend. But he could not wait. He needed to find Nzuri, to confront her once and for all. Only then could he restore balance to the land and reclaim what was rightfully his. But where had she gone? Nzuri was a master of the shadows, always one step ahead. She had disappeared into the dense underbrush before Kiongosi could strike, but he knew she wouldn't stay hidden for long. She would return, and when she did, it would be on her terms. With a heavy heart, Kiongosi turned away from the battlefield, his mind already planning his next move. There was no time to waste. The fate of the savannah hung in the balance, and the lion's roar would not be silenced until justice had been served. The journey to find Nzuri was long and treacherous. Kiongosi crossed rivers, climbed rocky hills, and navigated the thickest forests in search of any trace of the elusive leopard. Along the way he encountered old allies, some still loyal, others with hearts swayed by fear or ambition. Each one gave him the same warning. Nzuri was not to be underestimated. She was cunning, ruthless, and always several steps ahead. As the days passed, Kiongosi began to feel the weight of isolation. His pride was broken, and he was no longer the king who had once commanded the respect of the entire savannah. He was a lion on a mission, driven by the desire for vengeance, but at what cost? Would his thirst for revenge lead him to the same darkness that had consumed Nzuri? One evening, as the lion rested beneath the shade of a large baobab tree, he heard a rustle in the distance. His ears perked up, and his eyes scanned the horizon. It was too quiet, too still. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was not Nzuri, but someone who had long been lost to time. Mrembo, the wise old elephant matriarch. Her massive frame moved with slow grace, her wrinkled face etched with years of wisdom. Kiongosi had known her as a young cub, when she had taught him about the ancient ways of the land. But time had passed, and the elephant had become a distant memory. "Mrembo," Kiongosi called out, his voice low but filled with both respect and curiosity. "What brings you here?" The elephant's wise eyes met the lion's, and for a moment, the two stared at each other in silence. Then Mrembo spoke, her voice heavy with sorrow. "The land is in turmoil, Kiongosi," she said. "The winds speak of war, of darkness that stretches beyond what the eyes can see. Nzuri is only a part of the problem. There are deeper forces at play, forces that seek to unmake the very fabric of the savannah." Kiongosi's heart sank. He had known that Nzuri was dangerous, but he had not realized that her betrayal was only the beginning of something much darker. "What do you mean, Mrembo?" the lion asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've fought her once, and I'll fight her again. But if there are other forces at play, I need to know who they are." The elephant stepped closer, her massive form towering over Kiongosi. "There are those who have long sought to rule the savannah, not through strength, but through manipulation and deceit. Nzuri was once a servant of these forces, just as you were. She was your equal, Kiongosi, a partner in your vision for the land. But power has a way of changing even the noblest of hearts." Kiongosi's brow furrowed. "But why? Why betray everything we fought for?" Mrembo's trunk swayed as she sighed. "Nzuri was not the only one to fall prey to the hunger for power. Even you, Kiongosi, were once tempted by it. But you had the wisdom to walk away. Nzuri, she chose differently." The lion's eyes narrowed. "And now she must pay the price for her choices." "No," Mrembo said firmly, her voice deepening with authority. "Nzuri must be stopped, yes, but you must also understand the nature of the darkness she has embraced. It is not just a fight for leadership, it is a fight for the soul of the savannah." Kiongosi's mind raced. Mrembo's words were like a chill that ran down his spine. He had thought that defeating Nzuri would be enough, but now he realized that the battle ahead was much greater. It was not just a fight for power, it was a fight for the very essence of the land itself. As the two continued their conversation, a distant sound reached Kiongosi's ears, a sound he had not heard in years. The unmistakable roar of a lion echoed through the savannah, but this roar was not his own. It was deep and ominous, filled with a power that sent shivers down his spine. Mrembo's eyes widened in recognition. "The time has come, Kiongosi. The shadows are no longer waiting. You must confront what has been set in motion before it consumes everything." Without another word, the lion turned and sprinted toward the source of the roar. His muscles burned with the rush of adrenaline, but his mind was focused. He was no longer just a king seeking revenge. He was a lion fighting for the future of the savannah itself. The savannah was still, as though holding its breath in anticipation. The distant roar that had shaken Kiongosi to his core echoed across the plains, reverberating through the trees and the tall grasses. It was a sound filled with power and a deep, unsettling darkness, a roar not of a lion, but of something far more ancient and far more dangerous. Kiongosi's paws pounded the earth, his heart racing. He had felt the winds of change swirling around him, but now they were a storm, a tempest that threatened to swallow everything he held dear. Mrembo's warning rang in his mind. The shadows are no longer waiting. His thoughts raced as he sprinted through the savannah. What had he learned? Nzuri was no longer the sole enemy. She was but a puppet, a pawn in a game far more ancient than the Pride Wars. This was a battle for the soul of the savannah itself, a fight against forces that sought to destroy its very essence. Kiongosi had been blinded by his thirst for revenge, but now, as the roar echoed once again, he understood. This was bigger than him, bigger than Nzuri. The lion's instincts told him to run faster, to find the source of the roar and confront it head-on. But his mind told him to be cautious. This was no ordinary battle. His entire life had led to this moment, a moment where the fate of the savannah rested on his shoulders. He could no longer be just the lion who sought revenge for a betrayal. He had to become the king the land needed, one who would fight for its future, not just for the past. As the lion approached the ancient tree known as the baobab of lost souls, a place feared by all who lived in the savannah, a dark figure emerged from the shadows. Nzuri. Her once sleek and majestic coat was now marred by dirt and blood, her eyes gleaming with an eerie, almost otherworldly glow. The leopard stood still, her tail flicking with impatience as she watched the lion approach. Kiongosi's heart clenched as he saw the transformation in her. She was no longer the trusted companion he had once known. She had become something else entirely, something darker, more twisted. "You've come," Nzuri said, her voice low and filled with disdain. "I knew you would." Kiongosi stopped just a few feet away from her, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Where is the true enemy, Nzuri? You've served them long enough. The game is no longer yours to play." Nzuri laughed, a sound that sent a chill through the air. "Oh, Kiongosi, you still don't understand, do you? I was never the one in control. I was simply following orders, just as you did once. But now the true master has awoken." Kiongosi's mind raced. The true master. Who is it? Who controls the savannah from the shadows? Nzuri's gaze shifted, and for the briefest moment, the lion saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, a fear she quickly masked. "It's not about power anymore, Kiongosi. It's about the darkness that exists beneath this land, beneath all of us. The roar of the forgotten is what you heard. It is the roar of the one who has been slumbering for centuries, the one who will bring the savannah to its knees." At the mention of the roar of the forgotten, Kiongosi's blood ran cold. He had heard the stories as a cub, legends whispered by the elders of a time before the first lions had walked the earth. They spoke of a being older than the savannah itself, a creature whose roar could shake the very foundations of the world. But those were only stories. Or so Kiongosi had thought. "Why didn't you tell me?" Kiongosi's voice was a low growl, the weight of the betrayal settling in his chest like a boulder. "Why keep me in the dark?" Nzuri's eyes hardened. "Because I had no choice. None of us did. The roar calls to us all. We were all fated to serve it." Before Kiongosi could respond, a shadow moved in the distance. Something massive, something that blocked out the sun. And then Kiongosi saw it. A colossal figure emerged from the mist, its body a swirling mass of shadows and ancient power. It was like nothing the lion had ever seen before, neither animal nor spirit, but something in between. The creature's eyes glowed with an unsettling red hue, and its massive claws scraped the earth as it moved forward. It was the source of the roar, the forgotten one who had awakened after centuries of silence. Nzuri dropped to her knees in reverence, her voice trembling as she spoke. "The roar of the forgotten. The ancient force of destruction. It's come to reclaim what was once lost." Kiongosi stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the immense power emanating from the creature, a force that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around it. This was the enemy, the true enemy, and Kiongosi knew that no one, no lion, no leopard, no creature of the savannah, could hope to defeat it alone. But then he remembered Mrembo's words. "You must fight for the soul of the savannah." It wasn't just a fight for power, it was a fight for the very heart of the land, for the balance that had been shattered by greed and betrayal. Kiongosi had been wrong to focus solely on revenge. The savannah needed him now, not as a king seeking vengeance, but as a protector of all that was sacred. With a roar that shook the very air around him, Kiongosi charged toward the creature. His claws bared and his heart full of purpose. He had no illusions that this would be easy. The roar of the forgotten was a force unlike anything he had ever faced. But Kiongosi was not the same lion he had once been. He had grown, learned, and understood that the strength of the savannah lay not in its rulers, but in its people and in its creatures. The battle that followed was one of unimaginable ferocity. The roar of the forgotten unleashed waves of dark energy that rippled across the savannah, tearing apart the earth itself. Nzuri, too, fought beside Kiongosi, though her motives were unclear. Was she still loyal to the creature, or had she too come to see the folly of her ways? Kiongosi fought with all his might, his roar filling the air as he clashed with the ancient force. The battle raged for what felt like hours, with the land itself trembling under the weight of their conflict. But slowly, ever so slowly, Kiongosi began to gain ground. The roar of the forgotten, though powerful, was not invincible. It had a weakness, its connection to the darkness, to the fear and betrayal that had sustained it for so long. With one final earth-shattering roar, Kiongosi lunged forward and struck the creature with all his strength. The force of the blow shattered the dark energy surrounding the roar of the forgotten, breaking its hold over the land. The creature let out a terrible scream, a sound that echoed through the savannah as it began to fade into the ether from which it had come. And with it, the darkness that had plagued the savannah for so long began to dissipate, replaced by the light of hope and renewal. As the dust settled, Kiongosi stood alone, breathing heavily but victorious. The savannah had been saved, but at a great cost. The betrayal, the darkness, and the final battle had left scars that would not soon fade. But the land would heal, and so would he. Nzuri approached him slowly, her eyes downcast. I was wrong, she said quietly. I never should have allowed myself to be consumed by the darkness. Kiongosi nodded, his gaze softening. We all make choices, Nzuri. It's what we do with those choices that defines us. And so, the lion's roar echoed once more across the savannah, not in anger or vengeance, but in triumph. The savannah had been tested, but it had survived. And with its survival came the hope of a new beginning. With the defeat of the roar of the forgotten, peace returns to the savannah, but Kiongosi knows that the true challenge is just beginning. The land must rebuild, and new leaders must rise to take their place. The lion's roar will not fade into silence. It will echo for generations to come, a reminder of the lessons learned from betrayal, revenge, and the true meaning of leadership.